Hi guys, welcome in my story corner. We read all kinds of stories here. Some are true stories, some fiction, and some true stories that we sometimes wish were fiction. We do them all. So if you're into intriguing, dark, and scary tales, it's time to kick back, chill, and relax. If you're new here, welcome. Stay a bit, see if you like it. We'd love to have you. If you like and subscribe, it helps us so much. Also hit the bell icon so you don't miss anything and help us get this channel off the ground.
They say the scariest stories aren't the ones with monsters, but the ones that actually happened. Real events, real people, real mysteries that science still can't explain. So lean in, get comfortable, and listen close. Because once you hear this story, you'll never sit in a dark room the same way again. It begins in upstate New York in the late 1980s with a man named George Mott, and the night his son came knocking at his door. Kendall Mott was driving to his dad's house, an old, lonely place surrounded by thick woods. His sister had been calling all day, no answer. Their dad, George, had lung problems, lived alone, and wasn't in great health. She was worried. Kendall agreed to check on him, but as he drove down that empty road, the woods seemed too quiet. The sun was sinking, painting the sky orange, but the shadows between the trees stretched long and black. Kendall told himself not to worry. His dad had been fine 2 days ago. Maybe he'd gone to the local diner with friends. Still, the silence pressed in heavy. When Kendall turned onto the long driveway, the house looked strange. The windows were darkened, almost tinted, as if something had smeared across them. He didn't like that. He reached for the doorknob and froze. It was unlocked and hot. Not warm, hot, like fire licked just behind it. His chest tightened. He flung the door open, bracing for flames, but there weren't any. Instead, darkness. Thick haze clung to the air, swallowing the light. The smell hit next. Smoky, yes, but sickly sweet, like burning sugar. His skin crawled. He flicked the switch. Nothing. The house buzzed with silence, yet it felt alive, as if it were breathing with him. Kendall called out for his dad. No reply. He moved through the dark, brushing past furniture, the haze scratching his throat. The deeper he went, the worse the smell got. He pushed toward the bedroom but couldn't see. Panic finally won. He bolted out, heart slamming, and raced to the neighbor's house. Minutes later, he returned with a flashlight and the neighbor at his side. Kendall couldn't bring himself to go back in. He waited, trembling as the neighbor stepped inside. Every second crawled. Kendall stood in the cold night, staring at the doorway, listening. Silence. Then the beam of the flashlight cut through the haze, sweeping across the living room. Kendall heard the man mutter something low, something shaken. When the neighbor finally stepped back out, his face was pale, his lips tight. "You need to call the police," that's all he said. What they found inside didn't just terrify Kendall, it baffled investigators for decades. The house wasn't burned the way a house should be. The walls were coated in soot, yet nothing was consumed by flames. A model ship sat untouched on a coffee table. Cassette tapes looked ready to play. But pill bottles melted into one fused clump. A fly swatter's handle drooped like wax, though the dresser beneath was unscathed. Stranger still, the fridge was normal on the outside, but inside, the butter liquefied. Hot dogs cooked. The fire seemed selective, almost intelligent. And then they went to the bedroom. The bed was destroyed. The springs bent inward, forming a hollow. Beneath the charred frame lay a blackened hole in the floorboards. Scattered among it were fragments. A skull, a foot, small piles of ash. That was all that remained of George Mott, a man over 180 pounds, reduced to just a few pounds of ash, like he'd been cremated in his own bed. Yet the wooden dresser beside him stood untouched. His oxygen machine still hummed. Cremation requires ovens hotter than most house fires could ever reach. But here, in this tiny room, George had been reduced to dust while the rest of the house stayed standing. No electrical faults, no gas leaks, no logical cause. And the smell, every witness remembered it, the same cloying, sweet odor. It wasn't just fire, it was something unnatural. Inspectors shook their heads and called it accidental, but one man refused to let it go. Tony Moretto, an old friend and fellow firefighter, couldn't believe George would ever be careless. He obsessed over the case. Nothing made sense, until someone whispered a word that made his stomach drop: spontaneous human combustion. Rare cases where people simply ignite from within. Some leave behind nothing but ash and bone, sometimes a foot, sometimes a hand, always the same smell, always the same glaze of strange residue on surfaces. And George's case fit the pattern. And George wasn't the first. Back in 1725, a Parisian innkeeper came into his kitchen to find his wife reduced to ash on the stone floor. Her body, gone. Her skull and legs, all that remained. Yet, inches away, wooden spoons lay neatly stacked, untouched by flame. No scorch marks, no smoke damage, just the impossible remains of a woman who had burned hotter than any fireplace could ever reach. The first of many who would be remembered this way. Larry Arnold, a paranormal researcher, explained it best. It's as if fire blooms inside the body, devours it, and dies before the room around it can catch. Over 200 similar cases exist. Bodies burned to ash in kitchens and chairs and bed, while the surroundings sit untouched. And that sweet smell, always there. George Mott wasn't just another tragedy. He was one of the most chilling, unexplained cases of spontaneous human combustion ever recorded. Then in 1951, Florida. A landlady knocked on her tenant's door. The knob was hot. When she pushed it open, she froze. Inside, the tenant's body had collapsed into ash on the floor, except for her skull and one leg still intact. The air stank of that same sickly sweet odor. The most chilling part? Newspapers lay piled next to her, yellowed and dry, not even singed. Fire had touched only her, as if choosing its victim. Another case, Dublin, 1970. An 89-year-old widow. When found, she was nothing but ash, except for her feet. That was all. On the table, a vase of fake plastic flowers had melted into a puddle. But the curtains, the furniture, her books, untouched. Imagine that. A woman erased by fire in her own home, yet the lace tablecloth beneath her sat clean, free of burns. Investigators stood in that room for hours, whispering the same word: impossible. Over and over again, it's the same pattern. A body burns with the heat of a crematorium, but the fire never spreads. A sticky glaze clings to walls and shelves, like caramel hardened in place. Witnesses gag at that sweet odor in the air. Sometimes only a skull remains. Sometimes a foot, cut clean at the ankle. Always in their homes, alone, their deaths marked by silence, until someone finds them too late. Science has tried to explain it. Some said alcohol in the body makes us flammable. Others blamed God's judgment. But no theory has ever held up. Larry Arnold, the researcher, believes it's electrical. That somehow, the sparks inside our bodies, the ones that keep us alive, can misfire, amplifying into a storm. A fire from within. A fire that consumes us completely, faster than we can even scream. So when Kendall stood outside his father's house, staring at that black haze and breathing in that sugary sweet smoke, he had no idea he was standing at the edge of one of the most terrifying mysteries in human history. His dad hadn't just died. He had joined a small, cursed list of people who had burned without warning, without mercy, from the inside out. Doctors, Fire investigators, even scientists have all studied these cases. Some insist it's a myth, others admit the evidence is impossible to ignore. Hundreds of reports across centuries, scattered across the world, all with the same chilling signature: a body reduced to ash, a room left untouched, and that strange, sweet smell. Which leaves only the question, if it happened to them, why couldn't it happen to you?